They laughed at him, right there in the courtroom. A single father in a simple sweater asking for custody? But what no one knew was that this quiet man was hiding a truth, powerful enough to silence the entire room. The courtroom felt colder than it should have. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the people inside it. Eyes that judged. Whispers that cut deeper than words spoken aloud. And silence, the kind that waits for someone to fail. Ethan Carter sat at the far end of the defense table, his hands resting quietly over a thin stack of papers. His gray sweater was neatly pressed but worn at the edges. His watch, simple, black, practical, ticked softly against his wrist. No designer suit. No expensive lawyer. No presence that demanded attention. Just a man. A man everyone had already decided was going to lose. Behind him, the faint murmur of the gallery drifted like smoke. Is he serious? He came alone? Poor guy doesn't stand a chance. Ethan heard every word, but he didn't react. Not a twitch, not a glance. Because this wasn't new to him. Being underestimated had become familiar. Across the room sat Claire Whitmore. Everything about her was sharp, her blazer perfectly tailored, her posture unbreakable, her gaze precise, calculated, and cold. She wasn't just confident, she was certain that this case was already over. Claire leaned slightly toward her client Ethan's ex-wife, Rebecca. Rebecca's eyes were red, but not from crying, from exhaustion, from frustration, from something deeper. She didn't look at Ethan, not once. That hurt more than anything else. Narration, soft, reflective, because once upon a time, she used to look at him like he was her entire world. The sharp sound of a gavel echoed. All rise. Everyone stood. Judge Reynolds entered with steady steps, his expression unreadable, his presence commanding silence without effort. Be seated. The room obeyed instantly. The judge glanced down at the file. Case 417 custody hearing regarding minor Lily Carter. At the mention of her name, Ethan's fingers tightened slightly. Just for a moment, Lily, his daughter, his reason for breathing. Flashback transition, soft piano tone. Morning sunlight spilled into a small apartment kitchen. Lily sat on the counter, swinging her legs, cereal spoon clutched in her tiny hand. Daddy, why do pancakes smile? Ethan, half asleep, chuckled as he flipped one in the pan. Because they know you're about to eat them. She gasped dramatically. That's scary, he laughed. Then I guess you better save them. She shook her head firmly. Nope, I'm still eating them. Back to the courtroom. Ethan blinked once. The memory faded. But the feeling stayed. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses. Mr. Carter, you are representing yourself? A pause. The entire room leaned into that moment, waiting, hoping for hesitation. Ethan lifted his head. Yes, Your Honor. And just like that, the first ripple of amusement spread across the courtroom. A man in the back row let out a quiet chuckle. Bold move. Another whispered, or a stupid one. A few soft laughs followed. Claire didn't laugh. She didn't need to. Her slight smirk said everything. She stood gracefully, smoothing her blazer. Your Honor, if I may proceed. Go ahead, Miss Whitmore. Claire walked forward with confidence that filled the room. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Every step felt controlled. Intentional. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Rebecca Whitmore, is seeking full custody of her daughter, Lily. She paused. Let the words settle, then continued. While Mr. Carter may care for the child, care alone is not enough. Her tone sharpened slightly. Stability matters, security matters, structure matters. Each word landed like a quiet blow. Ethan remained still, but inside every word echoed. Claire turned, finally looking directly at him. And unfortunately, Mr. Carter has consistently failed to provide any of those things. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Objection, Ethan began, then stopped himself. He exhaled slowly. No lawyer, no strategy, just truth. Claire continued, pressing forward. He has no verified income over the past year. No permanent residence registered under his name. No formal employment records. She raised a document slightly. Would you like me to continue? Judge Reynolds glanced at Ethan. Mr. Carter? Ethan shook his head lightly. No, Your Honor, but inside his mind. The words weren't so calm. Internal monologue. quiet, heavy. You know why there's no record? You chose this? You walked away from everything for her? Claire turned back to the judge. My client, on the other hand, has maintained a stable home, a structured environment, and a consistent educational plan for the child. She softened her tone slightly. As a mother should, that one line. It hit deeper than the rest. Ethan's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in restraint, because he knew something they didn't. Something no one in that room understood. Minnie Hook, low whisper, they were judging a chapter. Without knowing the entire story. Another flash of memory. Rain against a hospital window. Rebecca crying, doctor speaking in hushed tones. Ethan standing still, numb, completely numb. She didn't make it. Those words, they had changed everything. Back in the courtroom, Ethan's eyes flickered for just a second. Pain passed through them, then disappeared. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Carter, do you have any evidence to counter these claims? A pause, long enough to make the room uncomfortable. Ethan looked down at his hands, calloused, steady, real. I don't have documents, he said quietly. And just like that, the whispers returned, louder this time. Claire didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. But I have something else, Ethan added. The room didn't expect that. Claire's expression shifted just slightly. And what would that be? The judge asked. Ethan looked up. And for the first time, there was something different in his eyes. Not hesitation. Not fear, something stronger. Time, he said. The word confused everyone. I have time with her. Every morning, every night. Every moment that mattered, his voice was still calm. But now it carried weight. I was there when she couldn't sleep. When she was scared of the dark, when she thought monsters lived under her bed. A faint smile touched his lips. I checked anyway, just to be sure. A few people shifted in their seats. Claire crossed her arms. This is not about bedtime stories, Mr. Carter, Ethan nodded. You're right. A pause. Then it's about being there when it counts. Silence. Real silence this time. But Claire wasn't done. Not even close. Then where were you? She said sharply. When the school called last month because Lily had a panic attack? That hit hard. Ethan froze, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. The courtroom noticed. Claire noticed. And she pressed. Or should I remind the court that you weren't reachable for over 12 hours that day? Rebecca finally looked at him. And in her eyes, there it was, disappointment. Ethan swallowed. His throat dry. Internal monologue, shaking. You were there, just not where they think. You had a reason. But you can't say it, not yet. The judge's voice cut through. Mr. Carter. Is that true? Ethan hesitated, and that hesitation spoke louder than any answer. Yes, he said finally. A quiet gasp moved through the room. Claire stepped back slightly. Victory almost within reach. Your Honor, she said smoothly, I believe the facts speak for themselves. Everything was slipping slowly, quietly, inevitably, but Ethan didn't panic. Instead, he reached down, slowly, carefully, into his worn leather bag. The room leaned forward again, curiosity replacing judgment. Claire watched, unimpressed. What could he possibly have? Ethan's fingers wrapped around something, solid, important. He pulled it out halfway, then stopped. Because suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open. The sound echoed like thunder. Everyone turned. A man in a sharp suit stood there, slightly out of breath. Eyes searching, urgent. I'm sorry, Your Honor, he said quickly. But this changes everything. He stepped inside. His gaze locked onto Ethan. Relief flooded his face. Mr. Carter, we've been trying to reach you everywhere. The room fell completely silent. Claire frowned. The judge leaned forward. Even Rebecca looked confused. And Ethan slowly stood up for the first time in the entire hearing. He didn't look like the man they had been judging. He looked like someone else entirely. Cliffhanger, cut to black. And just as the man approached the table, he said words that would shake the entire courtroom. Sir, they're ready. All of it. The courtroom froze. One interruption. One unexpected arrival, and suddenly, the man they laughed at wasn't so ordinary anymore. The doors slammed shut behind him with a force that made the wooden panels shiver. Every eye turned instinctively toward the sound, and in that instant the atmosphere changed. The quiet hum of whispers was replaced by a taut, expectant silence. People shifted uneasily in their seats, and even the bailiff paused mid-step, unsure whether to intervene or observe. The man adjusted his tie with deliberate precision, scanning the room slowly, deliberately, until his eyes locked on Ethan. Relief softened his otherwise sharp, professional demeanor. A flicker of something almost human breaking through the stoic mask. "Mr. Carter." "We've been trying to reach you," he said, his voice measured, calm, but laced with an authority that made the murmurs in the courtroom fall silent. Claire frowned, her forehead creasing. "Excuse me, who are you?" The man stepped forward, each stride confident and controlled, the polished shoes making a subtle click against the marble floor. "Daniel Reeves, legal counsel." A ripple of confusion spread across the courtroom. People exchanged uneasy glances. The judge raised an eyebrow, his gavel still poised in hand. "Counsel for—" Judge Reynolds asked, his tone guarded, wary. Daniel's gaze never wavered from Ethan. For him, silence, complete, suffocating silence. The air seemed to thicken, heavy with anticipation and disbelief. Claire blinked, almost as if expecting the scene to vanish, to wake up from a dream. "But he said he was representing himself." Ethan's voice, low and steady, broke the tension. "I was." A pause, then, with deliberate calm, he added, "Until now." Narration, slow, building intrigue. Something shifted in that room. The laughter that had once filled the hall, the smirks, the half-hidden smirks of people confident in their assumptions, they all evaporated. What remained was the unsettling feeling that the balance of power had tilted, and no one was sure in which direction. Daniel placed a thick folder on the table with a controlled force, a sound that resonated like a starting bell. This was no ordinary file. It was weighty, almost symbolic, a compilation of every piece of ammunition Ethan might need. Not just papers, but proof, preparation, strategy, and power rolled into one. Claire's eyes darted to the folder, a subtle tension curling her lips. She tried to recover her composure, her voice sharp, controlled. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular," but Judge Reynolds, experienced and deliberate, raised a hand. "I'll allow it." Daniel opened the file. The papers inside were neatly arranged, color-coded, and annotated in precise handwriting. He slid the first document forward with a calm, unshakable grace. "Let's start with the claim that Mr. Carter has no financial stability," Daniel said. Claire glanced down. Her expression, subtle at first, began to betray a flicker of doubt. "Is there a problem?" Daniel asked gently, almost conversationally, but there was steel behind the words. Claire hesitated, scanning the numbers before her. "These numbers can't be right," she muttered, her voice almost unsteady. "Minnie Hook," low whisper. "Oh, but they were." "And they were just the beginning," Daniel continued, his voice calm, unflinching. "Mr. Carter owns 72% controlling shares in Carter Technologies." Gasps escaped from various corners of the courtroom. Someone in the gallery whispered, almost reverently, "That company's worth billions?" Claire's carefully constructed composure began to crack. "That's impossible," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief, frustration, and panic all at once. Ethan finally looked directly at her, his eyes steady, unwavering. And for the first time he spoke to her directly, intentionally. "Is it?" For a moment, everything seemed to blur. The courtroom, the papers, the whispers, they faded into a haze as memories surfaced. Flashback. A younger Ethan, hunched over a laptop in the dim glow of a late-night office. Coding, debugging, building, failing, restarting, repeating. No applause, no recognition. Only the relentless, grinding effort that refused to stop even when exhaustion screamed for him to quit. Days blurred into nights. Nights into mornings, months, then years. The world outside seemed oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in a small apartment, in a quiet corner of a city that didn't know it was witnessing the birth of an empire. And then one day, it all changed. Not because anyone noticed. Not because there was a sudden fanfare or applause. But because persistence, skill, and vision converged, creating something unstoppable. Something that would later be measured not just in dollars, but in influence and impact and legacy? Back to the courtroom, Daniel spoke, precise and unwavering. He stepped down publicly after his wife passed, chose privacy, chose his daughter. The room softened, just a little. People who had been ready to dismiss him as ordinary now reconsidered. He had not just wealth. He had integrity, priorities, a life lived beyond the superficial. Claire, ever calculating, tried one last angle. "Money doesn't make someone a good parent," she said sharply, attempting to claw back control of the narrative. Ethan nodded slowly. "You're right," he said. "It doesn't." Another pause. Then, quietly, softly, he added, "But being present does." Emotional beat, soft piano tone. And suddenly it wasn't about wealth anymore. Not about shares, not about property, not about the millions in a bank account. It was about something far more powerful: love, dedication, sacrifice. Judge Reynolds leaned back, absorbing the weight of the moment. "Mr. Carter, why didn't you disclose any of this earlier?" he asked, his tone curious rather than accusatory. Ethan answered simply, his voice quiet but resolute. "Because I didn't want custody decided by money." A silence followed, heavy, respectful, the kind of silence that demanded reflection, that made even the skeptics pause and reconsider. But then Claire did something unexpected. She smiled, cold, calculated. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a strategic, predatory smile. "And what if I told you, Your Honor, that Mr. Carter is hiding something far more damaging than wealth?" The courtroom gasped. A ripple of tension spread like wildfire. Judges leaned forward. Spectators whispered nervously. Even the bailiffs exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan's lips tightened into a thin line. He remained seated, calm, but the flicker of tension around his eyes betrayed the recognition of a challenge and unexpected escalation. Daniel's voice cut through the murmurs, calm and unwavering. "Then I expect you to present that evidence," he said, his tone both polite and lethal. Claire's smile widened. "Oh, I will," she said, producing a folder of her own. Its black leather cover seemed almost theatrical, like a harbinger of doom. "But you won't like what you see." Tension beat. The gallery leaned forward. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, and every set of eyes was fixed on the center of the courtroom. Ethan's daughter sat quietly beside him, her small hand clutched in his. The innocence of her presence contrasted sharply with the calculated, high-stakes drama unfolding around her. Claire opened her folder, and a single photograph was revealed. She slid it across the table toward the judge. It was a picture of Ethan, taken months earlier, in a situation that looked compromising. "Explain this," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. Ethan's jaw tightened. The courtroom felt suffocating now, every breath measured, but Daniel didn't flinch. He picked up the photograph carefully, examining it. And then he smiled, faintly, reassuringly. "Your Honor," Daniel began, "this photograph was taken completely out of context. What it depicts is not illegal, not immoral, and certainly not relevant to his capability as a parent." Claire's brow furrowed. "Out of context?" "It's," Daniel interrupted smoothly, "it's a snapshot, one moment in time, stripped of its circumstances. We have the full story." "Shall I present it?" Judge Reynolds nodded. "Proceed." Daniel methodically laid out the timeline, the witnesses, and the corroborating evidence. One by one, Claire's claims unraveled like threads from a pulled seam. The photograph, once menacing, became irrelevant, almost laughable in its misinterpretation. Claire's smirk faltered, her voice rising slightly with frustration. "That doesn't change anything. He's still," Ethan cut in quietly. "It does, because truth matters more than appearances." Narration, building climax. Something was happening in the room. A shift so subtle, yet so absolute. Authority, respect, and credibility were gravitating toward Ethan, not because of money, not because of status, but because of consistency, integrity, and unwavering love for his child. Claire's final gambit hung in the air, but even she could sense the momentum slipping from her grasp. The judge's gaze was steady. "Mr. Carter," he said, "it seems the court now has a much clearer picture." Ethan smiled faintly, not triumphantly, but with quiet certainty. His daughter squeezed his hand. That small gesture carried more weight than any folder, photograph, or accusation. And in that instant, the room understood something fundamental. Sometimes, the most powerful things in life are invisible to the eye: love, presence, truth. Claire, realizing her strategy had failed, closed her folder with a sharp snap. Her eyes, however, still glimmered with calculation. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "You tried?" he said simply. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. The tension in her shoulders was palpable. She had underestimated him. But she wasn't done, not yet. The judge's gavel hovered, suspended in the charged air, waiting for the next act in this courtroom drama. Cliffhanger close, and then the unthinkable. Claire leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "Your Honor, what if I told you this case is only the beginning?" A shiver ran through the courtroom. Ethan's calm mask remained, but his mind raced, anticipating the storm yet to come. The courtroom lights seemed brighter now, sharper, illuminating every face in stark contrast. Every observer sensed that this battle had evolved. It was no longer about custody, money, or evidence. It was about strategy, perception, and the invisible threads of human determination. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan smiled quietly, knowing that he had already won the most important victory, the victory of truth, the victory of presence, the victory of love. Just when the truth set him free, a new accusation threatened to destroy everything. The words echoed in Ethan's mind like a cruel refrain, even as the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Claire stepped forward, her posture rigid, her gaze sharp and unflinching. There was no hesitation in her movements, no tremor in her voice, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Ethan. "If we're revealing truths today, then let's reveal all of them," she declared. Her voice sliced through the tense silence like a blade, precise, commanding, and unforgiving. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the muscles in his neck rigid with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. His pulse quickened. Every eye in the room felt like it was piercing through his very bones. He tried to breathe normally, tried to steady himself, but the memory that had haunted him for 3 long years clawed its way to the surface. Claire reached the table and placed a document down with deliberate authority. The paper made a soft thud, but in the courtroom it sounded like a cannon shot. "A police report," she announced. A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Whispers collided and overlapped, some incredulous, some judgmental. The room's temperature seemed to rise, the air thick with curiosity, suspicion, and the faint stench of fear. Daniel Reeves leaned forward, his brow furrowing as he picked up the report. "What is this?" His voice betrayed a hint of incredulity, though he tried to mask it behind the veneer of professional composure. Claire's eyes locked with his. "An incident. 3 years ago, assault." The words seemed to hang in the air, invisible but heavy like a storm cloud waiting to break. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Heads turned sharply, whispers escalated into murmured conjectures. For a brief instant, Ethan's vision blurred. Faces merged together, judges, lawyers, spectators, but only one face pierced through the haze of his mind, Lily, his little girl, 3 years old at the time. Innocent, trusting, fragile, fear, she had been so small, so vulnerable. "Daddy." Her voice, soft and trembling, haunted him. He swallowed hard, trying to dislodge the memory before it crushed him entirely, but it would not be silenced. The flashbacks came unbidden. Lily's tear-streaked cheeks, the pleading in her wide eyes, the helplessness that had burned into his soul. He had vowed never to forget. Daniel's eyes scanned the report quickly, his face darkening with concern. This was never prosecuted." His words carried both disbelief and a professional warning. In court, unprosecuted doesn't mean non-existent. Claire's smile was cold, almost triumphant, but it lacked any true warmth. "But it happened," she said simply. Her words were a scalpel to the truth, precise, undeniable. All eyes turned to Ethan. The weight of the room bore down on him. Every whisper, every pointed glance, every subtle shift in posture felt like a judgment. Judge Reynolds leaned forward in his seat, peering over the edge of his bench with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. "Mr. Carter, is this true?" His voice was firm but not unkind, a judge's voice that demanded honesty. Silence fell, heavy, crushing. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, seeking refuge, seeking courage, seeking some flicker of strength from the hollow pit inside him. Then finally he spoke. Yes. The single word was almost inaudible at first, almost lost amidst the gasps and murmurs that followed. But its weight carried through the room, anchoring itself in every consciousness present. The room erupted. Some gasps were of shock, some of pity, and some, he could sense them, were of judgment. He felt their eyes burn into him, dissecting him, evaluating every micro-expression, every hesitation, every shadow of guilt or pain. He opened his eyes and looked straight at Lily's empty chair in the courtroom, imagining her small form sitting there, looking up at him with trust that had never wavered despite the horrors of the past. He imagined the fear she had felt, the way it had clutched her tiny heart, and a pang of both sorrow and anger shot through him. The flashback hit him fully now. 3 years ago, it had been a rainy evening. The sky had been a heavy, angry gray, clouds rumbling low and oppressive. He had returned home early from work, hoping to surprise Lily with her favorite chocolate cake. But the house had smelled different, faintly of fear, of something wrong. He had found her in the corner of her room, trembling, her tiny hands clutching the blanket like a shield. She had not spoken at first, only shaking. And when she did, the words had pierced him sharper than any blade. I don't like him," she had whispered, barely audible, voice quivering. The memory surged, raw and merciless. He had called the police immediately, had insisted on reporting every detail, had pursued every lead he could, but the system had failed. The perpetrator had vanished into the shadows of bureaucracy, of legal loopholes, of a world that sometimes refused to protect the innocent. And now, here it was again, all colliding in the courtroom, laid bare in black and white. The whispers continued, but Ethan had shut them out. His focus was singular, the truth, his daughter's truth, his own. The years of silent suffering, of anxiety, of the gnawing guilt he had carried, were culminating in this moment. Claire stepped closer, her eyes glinting with a mixture of triumph and cruelty. "Do you deny it, Mr. Carter?" "No," he said again, louder this time, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "I do not deny it." The room seemed to vibrate with tension. Some leaned forward, eager for more, others leaned back, appalled. Ethan could feel the collective weight of their judgment pressing against him like iron bands. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses and looked down at his notes. "Mr. Carter, you understand the gravity of admitting to an incident like this in court?" Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I do, Your Honor, and I also understand that hiding it, protecting it, would dishonor my daughter, not myself. I will not do that." Daniel Reeves, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His tone was measured, professional, but laced with a hint of empathy. "Mr. Carter, your honesty is remarkable. But you must understand that this revelation changes everything in terms of legal proceedings. We need to address the assault, and we must ensure your daughter's safety moving forward." Ethan's heart thudded painfully at the mention of Lily. Safety. That word had been a mantra for the past 3 years, yet it had always seemed just out of reach. He took a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs and push against the fear constricting his chest. "She is safe now, and I will make sure she remains safe, whatever it takes." A hush fell over the room. Even Claire paused, her sharp gaze faltering for just a second as she realized that Ethan was no longer just a man being accused. He was a father, a protector, a survivor. The memories kept coming, unbidden but necessary. The late nights lying awake, imagining every possible danger, every possible betrayal. The endless nights of worry, pacing the floors, checking locks, checking doors, checking that Lily was breathing peacefully. The sleepless nights spent drafting letters, calling lawyers, navigating a system that had once failed him. And yet, through all that, there had been moments of triumph, 2 quiet moments when Lily had smiled, laughed, clung to him with innocent love, reminding him why he had fought, why he had endured, why he had survived. Judge Reynolds finally spoke again, his voice softer now, tinged with gravity. "Mr. Carter, this court will take into account your honesty, your past attempts to seek justice, and the circumstances of this revelation. But be warned, further proceedings will follow to address this incident. We must ensure justice is served. Ethan nodded solemnly. I understand, Your Honor. Claire, though visibly frustrated that her attempt to shake him had partially failed, composed herself. She knew the court would now tread carefully. His honesty had shifted the balance in ways she had not anticipated. The courtroom slowly began to settle, though tension still lingered like smoke after a fire. Daniel approached Ethan, lowering his voice. We'll get through this, Ethan, together. You did the right thing by telling the truth. That's the first step. Ethan exhaled, the tension in his shoulders loosening just slightly. I hope it's enough. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It is, for now, but the fight isn't over. Not yet. For Lily, we must see it through. Ethan looked toward the empty gallery where he imagined his daughter sitting, picturing her bright eyes, her small hands, her trusting smile. And for the first time in 3 years he allowed himself a flicker of hope. A fragile, tentative hope that the truth, painful as it was, might finally set them both free. The courtroom might have erupted, but Ethan felt a strange calm descend upon him. The storm of the past 3 years, the fear, the guilt, the uncertainty was not gone. It would never fully vanish. But at least now it was out in the open, acknowledged, and facing the light. And for Ethan, for Lily, that made all the difference.